second part then of changing the subject and solving algebraic equations, we're going to look at two more things. The first of which is powers and how we deal with them. So in the first equation here, we are trying to solve it because there's only one variable, there's the x. And instead of just being x this time, or an x with a coefficient, we've got an x to the power of 2, an x squared. So not only are we going to have to get rid of the 2 from the left side because we want the x on its own, we're going to have to get rid of the to the power of 2. The bottom one down here then, we're changing the subject. We want x to be the subject. At the moment though, we have the 2x all under a root. So again, we're going to have to get rid of that root. The reason why I've put under powers is because the root is anything to the power of a half, but by the by. So on the top then, the first thing I'm going to do is divide both sides by 2, because like we saw in the last video, if we've got 2 lots of something, I can divide it by 2. Now, if this had been in brackets, if the 2x had been in brackets, the whole of the 2x would have been to the power of 2, and I'd be dealing with the power first. But because there's no brackets, it's telling me that it's just the x that's to the power of the 2. So essentially, it's 2 times x to the power of 2. What I'm going to do is divide both sides by 2. The 2 here will cancel off on the one side. And we're simply going to have x squared is equal to 8 divided by 2, or x squared is equal to 4. So now we've got x squared on its own. We want x on its own by removing to the power of 2. Now the opposite of to the power of 2 is square rooting it. Just in the same way, the opposite to cubing something is to find the cube root, where we'd do a little 3 up here. X to the power of 4, the opposite is to the root of the fourth root, which would be a 4 up by here, and so on. But because it's the square root, we don't have to put a number 2 in, we just use the root sign. So because I'm square rooting the left side, I've got to square root the right side. And then the root here will cancel off the power of 2, leaving me with x, and then the right side will be 4 to the power of 2. So in other words, we're left with x on the left side, and we're left with the root of 4, which is 2, because 2 times 2 is 4. So let's have a look at the second one then. Well, firstly, I want to get rid of the root sign. Now, if I square this side, if I multiply it by itself, any root multiplied by itself, so say the root of 3 multiplied by the root of 3, cancels out the root, and we're left with 3. So if I square a square root, it'll cancel it off, and in this case on this side it will leave me with 2x. Notice how I am squaring the whole of the 2x, not just the x. But if I'm going to square the left side, then I have to square the right side. So we've now got y squared. That has cancelled off the square root, because the square root was of the 2x, not just of the 2. And now I've got to get rid of the 2, but we know that when we've got 2 times x on this side, if we simply divide by 2, and whatever you do to one side, you've got to do to the other, we're going to be left with x, because the 2's will cancel off. So I've made x the subject when x is equal to y squared divided by 2. And we can't simplify it down. Next thing we're going to deal with is brackets, and what happens when they're in an equation that we have to solve or change the subject of. Well, fortunately we've done this already, because the first thing we have to do is expand the brackets. So like we did with an expansion of brackets, have a look at that video if you haven't. We're going to multiply everything separated by a plus or a minus by the number or the variable outside. So we're going to multiply x and 3 by 4, 4 times x added to 4 times 3, which is going to give us 4x plus 12 equals 2. And now to get the x on its own, the first thing we're going to have to do is shift the plus, remember from the last video, and when we move it to the other side it becomes negative. So we're left with 4x is equal to 2 take away 12, we're left, which is minus 10. And then, because we've got 4 lots of x on the left side, I want to cancel off that 4, so I divide it by 4. Multiplying x by 4, divided it by 4, the two 4's cancel each other off by here. And we're left with x is equal to minus 10 divided by 4, or x is equal to minus 2.5, 2.5. So let's go down the bottom then. Well, I'm going to make x the subject of the formula here. But do I actually have to expand it? Well, remember that being on the outside of the brackets, this is saying that 2x times everything in that bracket is equal to 8. So it's saying that 2x times y minus 3 is equal to 8. Now, if it had just been a 2 on its own, if we'd have forgotten about the y minus 3, we know that we divide this side by 2 and it cancels off the 2. So instead, what I'm going to do is divide both sides by y minus 3 because this is in a bracket. Remember, if it wasn't in the bracket, we couldn't do it. So by doing this, we're going to cancel off the y minus 3. And we're left with 8 over y minus 3 is equal to 2x. And remember, we could only do that because it was 2 times x times y minus 3, not 2 times x times y minus 3. It was 2 times x times y minus 3, y minus 3. So next we need to get rid of the 2. So I'm going to divide the right side by 2. Now the equivalent of dividing the right side by 2 is multiplying the bottom underneath the 8 by 2. So if I multiply the y minus 3 here by 2, I'm essentially dividing this 8 by 2. So I needed to divide both sides by 2. Under here, it's going to cancel off the 2 on the right side to leave us with x. On this side, I multiply everything underneath by 2, y minus 3 by 2, and that will give me, we can simplify that down further because the 8 then will divide by the 2, giving us 4. If I just go back one, you can see here that there's an 8 on the top and a 2 on the bottom. And because I can't divide the 8 by y minus 3, but because it's 2 times y minus 3, I can divide the 8 by the 2. If it had been 2 plus y minus 3, I can't do it. But because it's 2 times y minus 3, I can. So I can simplify by simply dividing 8 by the 2 and leaving a 4 on top instead of an 8. And that's how we deal with brackets and powers in relation to changing the subject and solving equations.